And Congressman Ro Khanna, that California Democrat who's in a war of words with Elon Musk, joins me now. First, I want to ask you about the calls to sue you and or jail you, and what your response is to that, if you've gotten any engagement from Elon Musk where he can sort of publicly try to defend his record.
Well, I'm not going to be intimidated by this guy. I'm less concerned about me. I'm more concerned that the world's richest person possibly sentenced the poorest people in the world to their death. And the reason that he's upset at me and suing me is because I talked about us taking back the House, subpoenaing him, and investigating him. I mean, the academic study I cited is a year old. These issues have been put on the New York Times. It's not like I said anything new. So why is he suddenly scared? He's scared because he knows the Democrats could win back the House. He knows we'll have the subpoena power, and he finally is going to have to answer for these cuts.
That's a broader point. I mean, there's USAID and the human cost. And again, the Lancet study, 14 million additional deaths by 2030, averaging more than 2.4 million deaths a year. I know that number is just sort of incomprehensible, kind of scrolls past your eyes. 700,000 deaths annually of children younger than 5 years. You know, even if this were an order of magnitude off, and we're calling, you know, a tenth of that or 2 orders of magnitude off, 100 of that, we have never gotten any definitive investigation of what went on in those first few months of Doge across the entire government. I mean, we know that it completely failed in its mission. It did not reduce government spending. We know lots of people had to be hired back. But there was an enormous amount of destruction that I feel like we don't actually have a comprehensive view of.
We have no view on it. Frankly, if you brought a lawsuit, maybe there would be discovery. But there were 83% of programs that were shut down. Then Congress, through the process of appropriations, actually restored some of them. But there still were dramatic cuts. Now, the Lancet study talks about the potential debts, but there was a study in Boston that Atul Gawande actually oversaw that talked about the actual debts from what USAID cuts did. And all I'm saying is there needs to be transparency. Musk never came before the American people and said, here is why I'm cutting these things. He never came to Congress. He just did it at Doge, and it led arguably to huge devastation. And you know, now at least he's so ashamed of it. I mean, obviously, he doesn't want to admit that this could have been the consequence.
And you cannot be accused of being a longtime anti-Musk partisan. I want to read to you from 2 posts that you had on the Musk website of X. This is during the sort of end of 2024 after Trump had been elected, when this was getting set up. You said, I'm ready to work with @Doge, Elon Musk, Vivek Ramaswamy to slash waste. I have a track record of doing so. I led the charge to get Transdigm to refund $16 million after investigative reporting exposed price gouging. Let's look to the Truman Committee and ensure Americans get their money's worth of DOD spending. And then you follow that up when people got very mad at you for saying you were going to work with them. X isn't always real life, but 23 million plus views is the most of any post of mine has had in 9 years in Congress. Might have benefited from the company that he owns and the algorithm. Millions of Americans want us to work with Doge to cut wasteful spending. I am for spending money to improve people's lives, not wasting money. It's common sense. How do you feel about giving him the benefit of the doubt for this enterprise?
Well, let me just say now, a post has exceeded that. That's when Musk threatens to sue you and put you in prison. But I've known Elon Musk
that one has more views.
By far. But I've known Musk for a long time. I mean, he blurbed my first book on manufacturing. We worked when I was in the Obama administration on the Tesla loan that the Obama administration gave. I wanted it to have labor neutrality. And when Musk came to the administration, I've, as you know, Chris, been a consistent vote against the defense budget. I'm often the lone vote on the House Armed Services Committee. I think it's a bloated budget. And I thought, OK, here was someone who did take on the Boeing and Lockheed monopoly with SpaceX and Ash Carter, and maybe he could actually talk about cuts in defense. And so I said very openly that I was willing to work on it. It turns out that he did zero when it came to the defense budget, not a single cut, and he went on cutting USAID. And then he was totally unconstitutional and defied a subpoena, which we voted on oversight. and he started insulting me, but at least there was some back and forth. And now it's obviously a totally severed relationship, though I have said I'll debate him in public. Maybe I'll debate him on your show, I'll debate him on wherever he wants to debate. Well, I mean, I want to get to the facts.
We would happily host that debate. I would welcome that at any point, particularly to air out what the record of Doge was, which I don't think there's been an accounting for. You know, the final question I think here is about how compatible American democracy is with this level of concentrated wealth. You know, we talk about the robber barons and we look back at Rockefeller and Carnegie. In real terms, in terms of percentage of GDP, depending on how you want to try to apples it, inflation adjusted, we're in an era now that surpasses that. And we're also in an era in which, you know, thanks to Supreme Court jurisprudence, unlimited spending on campaign ads. And you really start to have to wonder, like, this is a guy who was sort of fomenting an ethnic pogrom in Northern Ireland 3 days before he became a trillionaire. And it just seems like there's very little accountability for him or any of his ilk.
Careful, Chris, he's going to threaten to sue you. But the reality is, and you know the numbers as well as I do, 19 billionaires, this is Gabriel Zuckman's work, 19 billionaires have the wealth that's equal to 12% of our economy. That's 3 times the wealth concentration of the Gilded Age. And it's not compatible because it's not just that Elon Musk is going to spend hundreds of millions of dollars to elect who he wants. He fundamentally believes that if a member of Congress says that he owes the American people an explanation or that he should be subpoenaed, that he can just threaten them, to sue them, to put them in prison, that he has total impunity and that he has a bigger voice, not just in his political contributions, but as a person in our democracy than the other 330 million people. And you have a group of people who have hoarded extreme wealth and power, really, which is what Bernie Sanders has been talking about to fight the oligarchy. I now see it firsthand. I mean, he's trying to intimidate me. I won't be intimidated. But look at how many members say, well, I don't want to deal with this hassle. Let's just move on. I want to focus on constituent services. I'm just not going to speak up. I don't want a lawsuit against me.
Congressman Ro Khanna, thank you very much.